Go ahead and get started. Today we're talking all about mums. I mean, there is nothing that says fall like our mums and mums selection. So, we kind of come through the summer and everything's kind of starting to kind of fizzle out a little bit, not profusely bloom as much as we're used to. And so we're looking for an additional color. And then we start to think about what colors are those. The oranges and the maroons and the yellows and the pinks and the purples. All of these colors play into what an amazing fall color show that these mums can put on. And you can get them lots of different ways. And we're going to talk about all those today. So mums can be grown in a wide array of different types and different areas. You can use them in your home, so you can use them indoors, and we're going to talk about florist mums a little bit. And then of course you can use them outside. You can use them in hanging baskets. I'm going to show you how to do that. You can use them in containers. I'm going to make a container at the end. And of course you can use them in the landscape as well. So it's a very exciting topic. It shouldn't be too long of a discussion. So we'll kind of run through a little bit of the basics here. And then I'll do a little demonstration and show you how you can use all these different things, all the different mums. So of course, I think the biggest question that I always get are they an annual or a perennial? Well, they're perennials really. Hardy garden mums are perennials. Now there's florist mums, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I don't have a lot to show, and I don't have any to show you right now because we're still waiting on them to come in. It's a little bit early for those yet. But garden mums are definitely perennials. They come back every year, but a lot of us treat them as annuals. And I think that's fine. If you want to pop them in a clay pot on your front porch, if you want to put them in a hanging basket, and when they fizzle, you can toss them. That is completely fine. That is not a problem. So a lot of us do treat them as annuals. We're looking for a splash of color in the fall season, and it gives you that. And so if you want to get rid of them after that, that's fine. Now, if you want to grow them as a perennial, I'm going to talk about that at length so that you can grow the best mum in your yard or your landscape. Because there's lots of opportunities there because they're very, very hardy. It used to be the perennial of the year for many, many years there. And I think in the 70s and 80s, it was a very, very popular perennial. A lot of people used them in their yards and landscape because they're very easy to grow, especially here in the Hampton Roads area. If you are watching around the country, then they typically are very hardy perennials in zones 5 to 9. So if you live in those zones 5 to 9, then you're going to be pretty much okay to plant hardy garden mums around and in your landscape. So there's a perfect time to kind of say there's the distinction in the type of mums that you're looking for. If you go to a local garden center, hopefully you come to McDonald Garden Center. If you come in, you're going to see them listed as garden mums or hardy mums. And those are going to be your perennial varieties. And then if they're just listed as a mum or a florist mum or a cutting mum, then those are going to be the ones that aren't typically as hardy. Now, in some areas, they'll make it through the winters, especially lighter winters. So even here in this area in Hampton Roads, sometimes our florist mums can come back. But they're not designed to. They've been hybridized to grow different types of blooms and different shapes and sizes. So florist mums are really called cutting mums because a lot of people use them for cut flowers. And there's a lot of different types. There's pom-poms, there's spider mums, there's the football mums. I think a lot of us probably are used to those big kind of really cool looking mums. There's a lot of different types of florist mums out there, and they're great and they're easy to grow indoors. They've been designed to grow indoors because they've been grown indoors the entire time, so they'll acclimate to your home very well. However, you can use garden mums in your house as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But that's kind of the biggest distinction is florist mums versus garden mums or hardy mums. And so hardy garden mums are very easy to grow, and you can plant them as a perennial in your landscape. So we're going to talk about that in a minute on how you want to do that. But again, most of us do treat them as annuals. That is completely fine. You can use them as an annual. A lot of times I like to use them to pop out some old annual color. Maybe something's fizzled through the summer and I'm just looking for a splash of color, maybe in a container. You can rip out a petunia or something that's maybe fizzled on you, and then you can pop in a mum just to give you that show, that big color, pop of color for you to get through some of this fall season. So that is kind of the biggest distinction there. Now, a lot of people might ask about asters. So let's talk about the history of mums. Chrysanthemums. Chrysanthemums is the long name. Mums are short for chrysanthemums. Asters are completely different. So when we're looking at mums, so this is just a regular garden mum, and you can see they can get very, very compact and very dense and full as this one is. Asters are typically in your cooler shades. So you're going to typically get those in the whites, the blues, the pinks, and the purples. So they're going to be typically in your cooler shades. Now asters are actually part of the larger genus, the larger family. So actually all mums fall under asters. So all mums are asters. However, not all asters are mums. So not to get too confusing here, but basically the mums that we all know now, the garden mums and even the florist mums, were hybridized between some Japan and China varieties that grew natively there, and they hybridized them to either be our very hardy garden mums or even some of our kind of cooler looking different florist mums that you might see out there. Asters are actually native to North America. So these are native plants, and they've been hybridized a little bit to get you some different blooms and some different colors. But these are great. Asters are awesome. They're perennials as well. A lot of people look for these for our local pollinators. They have a great source of pollen for butterflies and bees. So as those monarchs start to head down south again, they're looking for a little bit of energy. And so asters provide that. They have a great source of pollen. They bloom very easily, and they're a great landscape perennial plant, especially in a butterfly garden or a pollinator garden, because you're looking for something that's going to be blooming around now. And so asters are a great choice. You don't get a huge selection of these. Typically garden mums kind of rule the world, but asters you can find right now. We do carry them, and typically a lot of people use them in their landscape as a landscape plant. Typically going to grow a little bit more kind of natural, a little bit more native, so they're not going to be perfectly dome shaped like our garden mums are grown that way. But asters can grow, anywhere between 2 to 3 feet tall and maybe about the same width. Some can get almost 4 feet tall. Sometimes we might stake them because they can get a little floppy on us. But you can deadhead these very easily so they continue to bloom all the way through the fall season. They're not going to be, this one is putting on a big show, and they typically will. But in the landscape, typically you're going to let them start blooming in the late summer time frame and bloom all the way through the fall till our first frost. And you can just achieve that by going through and deadheading some of those buds off. So after this starts to fizzle on the top, I'm going to go in and just kind of take some of those off, prune them off, and look for buds down below and try not to prune those off. And then you can continue to get blooms out of these. So asters are great, not a true mum, because mums are really asters, but asters are a great option if you're looking for, especially for a pollinator garden. And you can pair them with a lot of different things, goldenrod, or even I grabbed this sedum right here. I love this guy. So this is called Autumn Fire Sedum. This is a really cool sedum. It's an upright growing sedum. It gets, typically about 1 to 2 feet tall and about the same width. But it gets these huge flower heads on the top, and pollinators love these flowers. So you can pair these with goldenrod, asters, some succulents that bloom in the fall. So there's a lot of great fall blooming perennials if you're looking for another source of pollen for our local pollinators. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I think it's very interesting. So mums, let's talk about garden mums for a minute. Garden mums typically get about somewhere between 1 to 2, maybe 3 feet high and wide. So they all kind of range slightly in size, and it depends on how you grow them as to how big they're going to get. They all prefer full sun, so they love full sun. If you can get them 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight, you're going to be the most successful with them. They really do love some sun. In a little bit of shade, they typically will experience some powdery mildew issues. The nice thing about mums, garden mums specifically, hardy mums, is they are very pest and disease resistant. They don't have a lot of issues with them. However, if you plant them in a little bit of shady spot, you might get some powdery mildew, you might get some leaf spot. Those are the common issues that we typically have with diseases or funguses on our mums. So if you're experiencing some powdery mildew, which is a little white kind of film, looks like powder all over the leaves, then you would want to treat for that, or you might want to consider moving it to a sunnier location. They can have small insect issues. Sometimes you'll get some leaf miners in there, or spider mites, mealy bugs sometimes, but not too many issues. They're also deer and rabbit resistant, so they don't have a lot of deer or rabbit issues. Not to say that deer or rabbit won't eat anything if they're hungry enough. They always can, but typically the deer and the rabbit don't mess with mums or asters, so they're a very great option for the landscape because of that. So they about that size, about 2 by 2 is typically what I tell people. And then what I always recommend, and let me mention this real quick, if you have any issues, then triple action is a great option. So I always recommend having a bottle of triple action round. This is an insecticide, fungicide, and miticide. And so if you have powdery mildew issues, then this can help it and cure it. It's always better to be preventative than curative, but this is a great option. It'll also take care of the mealybug and the spider mites and leaf miners and any of those other issues that you might have. But the reason I grabbed triple action is what I think is kind of cool, is this has neem oil, which I think we all know is an organic oil that comes from a tree, and so it can be sprayed on plants to suffocate insects and diseases, and that's how it works. But it's also got pyrethrins, and so when you look at that word pyrethrin, you might say, "Ooh, that sounds like a chemical. That's one of those traditional methods of killing." Actually, it's not. It's an organic substance that comes from chrysanthemums. So what's cool about that is you can actually treat insect and disease issues with a product that actually has chrysanthemum oil in it. And so that's what pyrethrin is. And so kind of a cool thing, but I always recommend triple action is one of my favorite go-tos. I definitely recommend you have one around your house, in your shed, in your garage, because if you don't know what the issue is with your plant, this is a great one because it does all three things. It's an insecticide, fungicide, and miticide. So if you don't know what the problem is, then this is a great option to spray your plants with. It's always better to be preventative than curative. And so if you're planting these as a perennial to come back each year, then you would want to spray them typically in the spring when they first kind of emerge. So typically I would say that's around May 15th, somewhere in that time frame. Once they've gotten to a little bit of size, go ahead and give them a little spray of triple action just to prevent any of those issues if you even have them. And then again, probably a second or third spray throughout the summer just to kind of make sure that we don't have any issues arise in the fall when we want them to put on their show. So if we're going to grow these as landscape plants, as perennials, know the size, 2 by 2. They like full sun, so they're going to need a good amount of sun. And then we want to make sure they have good, moist, well-drained soil, a rich organic soil. And what that means is we always want to use our native soil when we plant these. So when we plant these mums in our yard, then we want to make sure to amend our soil. And what you want to use is a mix of your soil, 1/3 your soil, 1/3 compost, and 1/3 perlite. And what that's going to do is amend that hole that you dig and that soil that you're going to put around it. But what you're going to do is when you put the soil back around the root ball, then you are going to you're going to keep your native soil in there, and that's going to make the plant get used to it. So as that root system expands, then it can break into your soil because it's already used to it. But what we're doing is adding organic matter and creating a moist, well-drained situation. The perlite's going to help for drainage, and the compost is going to add nutrients and organic matter, which is going to help retain moisture. So if we've got clay soil, then you definitely want to do compost and perlite. If we've got sandy soil, you might omit the perlite, but definitely add compost because compost is going to add that organic matter. And that's what all mums and asters love, is that rich organic matter in their growing media. So what else do we want to talk about? We've talked about the issues. Okay, so then let's say we've planted these, and typically we're going to plant them now in the fall because that's when they're available. I always tell people if you're looking for specific plants in the spring and you're not finding them, always check your local garden centers again, because garden centers work off of growers, and if they're not growing their own, then they have to pull in plants as they're available. And mums are available in the fall when they're starting to bloom. And it also gives you the ability to get the best selection that you want too. So if you come in the fall, if you're coming in the spring and you're looking for a garden mum, we're typically not going to have them because they're not blooming, they're just green, they might just be barely emerging from the soil, so we're probably not going to have many, if any at all. But in the fall is when you are going to get the best selection. It's not a bad time to plant them either. Yes, they're blooming, they're going through their kind of end of the year process. Garden mums bloom on shorter daylight, so that's why they're going to bloom in the fall season, but it allows you to see the color. So if you're looking for a maroon or a yellow or an orange or even the pinks and the purples, you can see all those colors, and that way you get to know what you're going to get out of your garden mum for your landscape. They work great as spots of color. They work great in masses. They're awesome in masses. Amazing in perennials, perennial flower beds. Also great for borders. So they're a great border plant because they don't get very tall. They only get 1 to 2 feet tall, and they look kind of like a little green boxwood while they're growing in the spring and summer. Once we plant them, of course, we always want to plant, whenever we plant anything, like I mentioned, amend the soil. Put some biotone starter fertilizer in there. It's a great way to kind of get that root system generated real quick. I do recommend with mums that we just kind of slightly rough up the sides. Whenever you buy a mum, you're probably going to see that it's a pretty root-bound plant, and that's because they have a very good aggressive root system, which makes them a very strong plant. But when you get a good aggressive root system like that in a pot that's been growing for a while, then you are going to want to slightly rough that up. Now, I don't recommend using a knife, so we're not going to score it. We're not going to cut slits up the side of the root ball, but we are going to slightly kind of rough it up. You can use your hand. I like to just grab a stick or something or a piece of mulch and just kind of rub it on the sides. It kind of just flares the roots out. And what happens is when those roots kind of flare out a little bit, it allows them to know that they're not being grown in a pot anymore. If we just take it straight out of the pot and go straight into the ground, and I'll show you that a little bit later when I plant one of these up, then what it can do is it actually can think it's in a pot. And then that root system will just sit there and wrap and wrap and wrap, and eventually can cause the plant to die. So we want to make sure to loosen up the root ball. And then we want to fertilize. So let me talk about, okay, so you're going to plant it this fall because that's when you're going to get the biggest selection. But what do I do next year if I'm growing it in my landscape? And I think that's probably the most common question. If you've ever grown a mum, a lot of people that grow them in their landscape, what they typically do is they get big, they look great, and then as they start to bloom, they kind of fall apart a little bit. And that's because they get so profusely covered in blooms that the water and the moisture from rains that we have will make them kind of get heavy and kind of tend to fall apart. And they are somewhat brittle of a plant, so meaning that the actual stem and the leaves and the structure of the plant is not super strong. Very aggressive root system, and it's not going to hurt it. So if you don't want to ever touch them, that's fine. But what I recommend is in the spring, when they emerge, typically probably around April 15th or so, so right around May 1st is when I would recommend giving it its first dose of fertilizer. And I would recommend our McDonald Greenleaf. We've got it in a traditional formula. We've also got it in an organic formula. These are great fertilizers designed for Hampton roads, and it's going to give it all the elements that it needs. So not only does it have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, your big macronutrients, it's also got micronutrients. So it's got boron and zinc and molybdenum and iron and all those good things that our soil lacks in this area. And so it's got trace elements, micronutrients, that are going to help keep that shrub going, keep that perennial going, keep that mum going all the way into the fall season. Now we're going to do our first fertilize around the May time frame, so about May. So about May 1st is when I recommend the first dose of fertilizer. Now your plant's going to grow, and then what I want you to attempt to do, if you're going to grow these in your landscape, is I want you to do a prune on them 3 times if you can, 2 to 3 times if you can, before July 1st. And so what that means is you want to let it get a little bit of size, and then we want to shear it back. And so what I mean by shear is you can just take a pair of hand pruners if you want to and just cut it back into shape or size. You can take hedge shears, which are very easy to use, your big scissors shears, and just kind of hedge it back a little bit. And so if I plant this one this fall, then by next spring, I'm going to have a good sized plant by about that end of May time frame. So we're going to give it a little dose of fertilizer. We're going to give it a little bit of plant food. It's going to grow for about a month. And then it's going to get pretty good size on it because we're going to get all of our spring rains. You're going to get warmer weather. It's going to start to warm up and the plants are going to start to grow. And then I want you to prune it back about 1 to 2 inches, 2 to 3 times before July 1st. So I know that's kind of tricky and you're kind of wondering why. Well, what that does is a lot of these buds will form early. So if you see buds forming on that, don't worry. Go ahead and prune it. But what we want to do is we want to establish a nice strong plant structure. We want to keep the size compacted a little bit, and we want to allow it to branch more and thicken up below. Anytime we prune any plant, then it's going to branch more from where we prune it. So if we're pruning a straight stem and we prune that off, then it's going to branch below it. And that's what mums are going to do as well. So if you ever look at your mum, if you ever look at it real close, you're going to see where it's been pruned and it's branched out. And instead of 1 bud, I've got 5 buds. But I want you to try and get 2 or 3 prunes in if you can. And every time we're going to prune about 1 to 2 inches off the entire plant. And these grow in a dome shape, so it's very easy to prune. You just keep that natural shape. Just cut it back 1 to 2 inches. You really can't hurt them. And then we want to do a second dose of plant food, a second dose of our green leaf around that July 1st time frame. So when we do our last prune, then we're going to give it a little bit of fertilizer. We're going to make sure to keep these plants mulched. They love that moist, well-drained soil. So if we keep them mulched, that's going to help keep the moisture in. Give them water during very dry times. The nice thing about mums is they'll tell you if they're dry. You'll see all those little leaves that are in there. They'll kind of sag a little bit. So if you're ever experiencing some drought, then make sure to go out there and water them. because in extreme heats they can wilt a little bit, and that can deter the amount of buds and blooms that it will produce in the fall. Now, garden mums bloom when the days get shorter. So naturally, when we stop around that July 1st time frame, then all the way through July and August, it's going to be filling out a little bit more. It's going to be producing buds. And then as the daylight gets shorter, so we have the long days of summer, and then as that daylight starts to get shorter right around now, that's when they know to go ahead and bloom. And so that's what they're going to do naturally. And that is how you get the biggest profusion of blooms from your mums, is by doing that little bit of pruning and that little bit of plant feeding. Really helps generate that big, huge bloom set that you see. So when you buy a mum, you're going to see this great shape to it, this really nice dome shape, all these buds in there, and that comes from a couple prunes. So again, if we can get 1 to 2 prunes in, then it really does help with our bloom profusion. Really helps kind of keep those blooms going all the way into the fall season and gives you that big color that you're used to. If you want to just plant them and don't mess with them, that's fine too. They're great, just naturalized plants. They look great. Again, if they get big, they might kind of flop over a little bit. They might kind of open up in the center because some of these blooms will get so heavy in there that they can kind of split apart, like I mentioned. So a little bit of pruning does help keep it nice and full and compact. And they make great perennials. Super easy. Once they're established, they don't have a lot of issues. You might find that you can split them. And so what you'll see is they have good aggressive root systems. And eventually what will turn into what was one mound might produce another plant and produce another mound. And they'll start to kind of naturalize an area. And you can go in and split those. And in the spring, when you start to see a clump emerging and you've got another clump next to it emerging, that's a great time to go in, dig that one out, and move it if you need to. We do want good air circulation around them so that we don't end up with powdery mildew issues, but typically they do very well in the Hampton Roads area, and you don't have a lot of issues with them. So I love growing garden mums as a perennial. I think it's a great option for a lot of us gardeners out there that maybe don't have a lot of time. It's very low maintenance. Couple prunes on it will get you a nice plant, but you don't have to. It just does help kind of keep that shape going and give you that big, huge bloom set as fall arrives. So now I want to talk to you just about a couple of different ways to use them. I'll give you some demonstrations here as I go. I've got lots of different types of mums here. So I'll show you, of course, one of my favorite ways of displaying mums. Let me move some stuff around. Is in a clay pot. I think it's so simple and just a classic fall look. This is an easy way of doing it. Just get a clay pot that fits the size, take your mum, and just pop it in there. And then you can do them on the doorsteps. Now, mums are typically going to come somewhere in 3 sizes, typically. We might get a couple different sizes in here and there, but this would be our 6-inch. So this is our starting size mum, $6.99. So a good little size mum here. Great for the smaller container. Great for if you're doing containers, and I'll probably use one of these when I plant up my container here in a minute, but they're great for this. I also love using, grab this other pot here so I can kind of show you as I kind of go through this, a cool way of doing clay pots. Clay pots have that fall feel to them. They're very easy. They're great looking. So we're going to take this is an 8-inch mum. So this is your next size up. These are $9.99. This is an 8-inch size pot. So you can see the different sizes in the pots here. So you got a smaller 6-inch, and then the 8-inch is bigger, and you're going to get a little bit more of an established plant. And so we can put that in there. All I would need is just a little bit of a riser, so we'll put that in there. And what I do recommend is planting them if you can. So if you can plant them, I do think that's a better way of doing it. As I mentioned, they have a pretty aggressive root system. They have a pretty strong root system. And so when plants are root bound, then we definitely want to give it some more soil to grow into. It'll also help with your watering. So I'll talk about watering requirements here at the end. And this is our bigger size. So this is what we call our 12-inch size. So this is a bigger one. These are $12.99. So you can see we've got a $6.99 6-inch, a $9.99 8-inch, and then 10-inch are $12.99. Sometimes we'll get some 12-inch in, maybe even like a bushel basket, which are huge. But this is a great size too. So you can see kind of the 3 different sizes. And then I just love to drop these in 3 clay pots just like this. Very easy. I would recommend planting these in a potting soil so that I've got more soil for those plants to last a little bit longer. It's going to help with water retention. You can just flip them in like that. very easy to do, and that's definitely a possibility, and it's not going to hurt anything if you want to do that. But as you can see, we've got 3 different sizes here of mums in our clay pots, and these will look great on a front doorstep, on a porch, or a patio. You can use the different sizes to kind of create groupings. I love to take a grouping of clay pots. You can take, let me see if I've got space to do this. So you can take this big one here, we can move this one here, and then we can put our little small clay pot in the front, which you can't quite see on your screen, but maybe I'll swap it out with an orange. So now I've got orange, yellow, and maroon kind of all together. And you can kind of see that with all those clay pots. It looks really great, and you can kind of group these together. It makes a nice little grouping. As we get pumpkins in, which will be very, very soon, you can put your pumpkins around it, gourds, a bale of wheat straw, corn stalk, all that fun stuff, Indian corn, and you've got a great fall display. Or you can just keep it classic and traditional and simple and just do a grouping of 3 different ones. So that's just an easy way of doing it. I love doing it this way. As I mentioned earlier, you can do you can swap out some of your annuals. So if you've got some annual container planters that maybe are starting to fizzle and you've got a couple plants that aren't quite doing as well, then it's a great thing to just take a 6-inch mum like this, rip out that annual, pop this in there for a splash of fall color. Very, very easy to do. You can also pair these with other plants. Like I love these cabbages. So you can use a cabbage like that. You know, just add a different texture in there, and I'll show you that when I plant up a container, how you can change textures. But this is a really, really great way of kind of continuing that fall look. So let me move a couple of these things around here, get myself some space. All right, so then also window boxes. They work great in window boxes. So if you've got window boxes around your home, this is a great option. Mums really create a nice centerpiece, and you can see that right there. I've got a mum. Let me see if I can hold this up so you can see it. I've got this really pretty golden colored mum with this really nice orange pepper that I picked next to it, and then I've got a little ornamental kale here, or cabbage. Ornamental cabbages and kales are very, very easy. They're going to last all winter long, and so very, very easy to do, and so you can use them in window boxes. Really nice, simple way of adding a fall color. You can also do them in hanging baskets. So again, I would personally plant them. I love these wrought iron, cocoa lined baskets, very easy to do, but maybe you've got an annual hanging basket that has kind of seen the end of time and it's just a green plastic basket, and you can reuse that if you want to. And all you have to do is just plant your mum in there. So I love these because they're really kind of that classic, very nice look. So all you got to do is just take this clip off. So we'll unclip that. We'll put this off to the side. I've got a nice big mum here. This is one of our 10-inch mums. So I got a nice big 10-inch yellow mum that's blooming or about to start blooming. And all I got to do is just work this chain through it. Now again, I personally would plant this. You don't have to, but I personally would. I think that really does help with the water retention and helps keep the blooms going longer. It really does. But if you want to just slip it in there, that is perfectly fine too, especially if you've got company coming over and you just want some simple, quick color. You got some old hanging baskets that need to be worked out. So all I did was just kind of work that into the plant, make sure that I'm not breaking anything and it's working in really nice and simple. And there we go. And then all I got to do is take this one over to this side and find the hole and clip it in. And there we go. And there we go. We got a nice little hanging basket mum. And again, you don't have to plant them, but you can plant them. But that would look great just hanging up. So we'll hang this up over here. And so they make a great show in a hanging basket. I know that's it's just barely off the screen there, so you probably can't quite see that. But they would make a great fall show in a hanging basket. Very, very easy to do. So I love them in hanging baskets. Also, I love them in containers. So what I'm going to do is kind of show you different ways that you can pair them and kind of come up with some different ideas. And then we'll plant one for you so that you can see how to use them. Now, if you were going to use these indoors, let me talk about that for a minute. So I'm going to plant this clay pot up here pretty soon. I'm going to take my riser out. But a lot of us might use them indoors. And so florist mums are obviously one of the most popular options for inside the home. And you're gonna get a lot of different selection. You're gonna get smaller ones, which are great for like a 4-inch pot or a 6-inch pot that you might have in and around your home. Make great table decorations as we go into the Thanksgiving time frame. So mums are always going to be available, and we'll have those in pretty soon. And you can pop if you're not in the Hampton Roads area, go to a local garden center. They're going to have a great selection of florist mums for you. Garden mums are what we have right now and what we're going to talk about a lot, but you can also plant florist mums outside. So you can also use those outside. You can also use garden mums inside. So what they're going to like is a fairly bright area. Doesn't need to be super, super bright. You're not going to keep them in there for too long. Typically, you're probably going to get somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks indoors. But you could take this inside, grow it inside for a couple weeks, enjoy the blooms. Make sure you use a container. Something like this guy right here. You can pop that in there. This is not going to be the right size, but it's pretty close. So you can pop that in a nice little white container or any kind of indoor pot. Doesn't have holes in it, so it will retain its moisture a little bit. Acts as my saucer, so it's a great option for you. But you can use garden mums inside. You can use florist mums inside. When using them outside, so when using them in containers, which is what I'm going to do next, then what I always do is talk about, you can either go contrasting colors or you can go similar colors. So for instance, you could do, like, I love this purple heuchera. Really, really pretty purple heuchera. You could do that with a maroon mum. And so we've got some very complementary colors that are going to be very, very easy to work with. And then we could add in another little, like a purple pepper or something in there that would add to that mix. You could also do contrasting colors, which I personally love, contrasting colors in the fall. They really show up and they're really, really easy to see. Now, when I'm selecting my mums, this is great advice, is when I'm selecting my mums, it depends on when I want them to bloom. So you're going to find a lot of mums that are like this, showing some color, but they're just cracking, they're just opening. Whereas something like, maybe like this aster here, which is not a great example. I don't really have a mum that's really kind of profusely blooming. But if I had company coming over, I had a party or something this weekend, I might be looking for mums that are showing full color or showing a little bit more color. I personally love to buy them like this because I know I'm going to get about 2 to 3 weeks out of them. I also would recommend, if you want them to last, if you want to see the entirety of its bloom, then get them when they're like this, barely showing color, so I know what color they're going to be. So I know kind of the color scheme that it's going to be. Most of your mums will also come with a little picture tag inside, because sometimes when they show yellow, they might actually open up with a little bit more white in them than you were to expect. But check out your tag, but also this is a great way to buy them when they're completely budded like this. Then I'm going to get probably somewhere about 4 to maybe 5 weeks before this is done blooming. So they're going to last a very, very long time, and this is a great way to buy them when they're very tightly budded like this. You might even find some that haven't even cracked and shown any color, and so that'll even get you a little bit more longevity out of it. But I'm going to use this clay pot and plant up a container. So I went around and selected a couple things. I love grasses in the fall. They add height, they add color, they add a different texture. And what I really thought about as I started to kind of design this container, start to think about it, is I always think about my 3 elements: spillers, fillers, and thrillers. So, the spillers are going to spill out the side of the pot. The fillers are going to kind of fill up a void. And then the thrillers are going to be usually some sort of big upright. And sometimes they cross the lines a little bit and they all kind of help each other out. But I usually like 3 elements in a pot. You typically want to do odds if you can. You can do a very symmetrical planter. You can put one right in the middle, put 2 mums on the side, 2 of something else is on the other side, like a pepper or something. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to plant up a perennial container. It's going to give me that fall look. I can grow it again into the next season if I want to. Or what I typically would recommend is after it's kind of done its thing, it's put on its show, maybe I'll take it apart and go plant them in my yard. So think about that as you're walking around and you're like, I need to put on a little show. I need a container from the front of my house. I've got a pot, or I'll just buy a clay pot or any other pot that you might want to use. You can use plastic, terracotta, glazed. Any of those pots are great. Not going to hurt anything. I just love terracotta for the fall. And then I've got this great Moly grass is what this is called. So really kind of wispy grass. Really cool looking, that fall look. What's really neat about this one is the plumes that come out of this are going to be kind of this pink color. So it's called pink Moly grass. Really stunning at sunset or sunrise when the sun's kind of shining in at an angle. Then it hits that plume. It's amazing looking. But I'm going to use this one as kind of my thriller. And then I'm going to use a yellow mum for contrast for my filler. And then my spiller, I'm going to use this heuchera, which I love heuchera or coral bells. Just this little leafy evergreen. It's not going to really spill per se, but it is going to cover up a portion of that side. So what I want to do just to start with is put some potting soil in here. Of course, I'm going to use our McDonald organic potting soil. I love this potting soil, especially for outdoor applications. It's got a really nice texture to it. It holds its moisture a little bit longer, which is nice. The mums are going to appreciate that. And so again, if I'm just sprucing up a container that I've got, it's always better to take them out of their pots rather than just sticking them in there, because it'll keep the longevity of the blooms going. So I'm just going to put my soil in there, fill that up a little bit. And then I always start with my thriller. I typically start with my thriller. I want it to be kind of big and bold. And in this situation, I'm going to do 3 elements. So I'm going to put one in the back, one on the front corner, and one on the other front corner. So it's going to be very simply laid out. So I'm just going to take my Moly grass. I'm just going to lightly grip it from the top, pull it out. And this will be a great time to kind of show you that root system. So really nice strong root system. I'm just going to lightly, gently kind of rough that up. Again, we don't want to use a knife or anything to really cut it or anything. We just want to kind of be able to pull some of those roots so that they're flared out. So let me see if I can show you that. So you can see all those roots are flared out, and then rather than being tight and compact. So then I'm just going to make a little space here, put this right in the back. I usually want about a 1 to 2 inch lip on my pot so that it can hold the moisture in. And this is a great grass because it really kind of flops and hangs everywhere. You can barely see me back here. But I'm just going to fill that around the sides. Put this off to the side so you can see me. And then I've got a bucket of potting soil over here to the side so I can use that to fill. Let's use that to fill in the edges. All right. Then I'm going to place my mum in there. And again, this could be any color. It could be maroon. It's whatever your favorite color is. I love yellow just because it's really that high contrast color. And so this one's got a nice dark root ball, which means it's not super aggressive yet, which means it's going to grow great in here for a while. And really, those blooms are going to last a long time. And sometimes, if we're a little tight, we might need to give it a little squeeze just to kind of maybe shrink up the size of that root ball a little bit. We're going to put that right over there on that edge, make sure we're at the right level, make sure both of my root balls are the same level as each other. So when I fill it up with soil, it's very easy to do. And then I'm going to take my heuchera, which I again love. And this could be a pepper. That would look really pretty in there. It could be cabbage, an ornamental cabbage or kale would be really pretty. Lots and lots of choices for kind of a spiller or another fall show. Even a pumpkin in here would look great. But again, what I'm doing here is I'm saying to myself, I want to make a perennial container. I want this to last. I want this to go, so I can have these plants to enjoy next year. And whether it's in this container or not remains kind of up to you. If you want to keep it in the pot, that's fine. The grass will go brown in the winter. The mum will die off. You cut that back. The heuchera will stay. Maybe you can put a pumpkin where the mum was to give you continue that fall look. Maybe you put a couple pine cones during Christmas. Very easy way to kind of keep the container going until the spring, until your mum comes back. But what you can also do is take all these plants and use them in your landscape. So very easy way of kind of continuing to keep those plants going. And so I love making a perennial container like that. So there you go. You've got your grass, which just kind of speaks fall to me. I just love grasses in the fall. A yellow mum, and then that high contrast of that burgundy heuchera. And then all I would have to do is just fill in with soil here, put in my green leaf fertilizer to keep the plants going, keep them going, and then water. And so very easy way of doing a nice fall container. So just an option that I thought you might be interested in. Again, so many different ways to use mums. They're just awesome plants. All right, so then that's basically kind of it. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here on my notes. So yeah, window boxes, hanging baskets, to add some late color to your landscape. They're great in mass plantings. Use them indoors, use them outdoors. Super easy, and lots of different ways to use them. The last thing I will tell you is watering. And I should have grabbed my Dram watering wand. I forgot to grab it, but Dram watering wands, if you've ever watched one of my webinars before, I talk about them all the time. I use them. That's what we use here at the garden center to water. When we water mums, especially if we can keep them on a porch or patio, those blooms are going to last a little bit longer. Natural rain doesn't hurt the blooms as much as our tap water does. And so what we want to do is keep the water off the blooms if at all possible. That'll keep the blooms going longer. So when I go to water this planter, instead of just putting my hose on top of here and getting everything wet, I'm going to make sure I go right down to the root source and water in the container. That's why I mentioned that 1-inch lip. I like to have a lip on it. So a lot of people will do our slip-in method, where they just take a pot and slip in their mum. Perfectly fine. I would prefer if you planted them in soil. I think it helps the longevity of them. But if you do that, it's really hard to kind of get in there and water it because it's a full plant. You can barely even get your hose in there. With the Dram watering wand, you can actually take the top off, which will give you just a straight spout, a straight flow of water. And you can put that down in here into the foliage and actually water in there, rather than trying to water the entire plant and getting all our blooms and our buds and our leaves wet, which can promote fungus and create the blooms not to last as long. If you water those blooms and then the sun comes out and it's really a warm day, that can actually wear on those blooms and break them down faster. So what we want to do is water the soil. Now, if you're just doing the slip-in method, you could easily pull this out, then make sure you get your hose right in here. But again, it's tight, it's compact, it's hard to get in there. So using a Dram watering wand would really help. You can use a watering can too, making sure that the spout goes into the plant rather than getting the whole top of the plant wet. So other than that, keep them moist, keep them well watered. If you let them get too dry and they start to wilt a lot, then it will affect your bloom time. It'll affect how long you have the blooms and how profusely it'll bloom. It also affects the color. It'll affect the color of the green, because as that plant kind of wilts and it goes into a stress period where it needs water to allow the nutrients to get up to the leaves, then those leaves will start to fade on you a little bit. So to keep your plants healthy and green, make sure to water them in a container, a hanging basket, a pot. You might water as much as once a day during this September timeframe when it's still warm. Now in October, you might water a little bit less. You might water every other day. If it's on a covered porch and you're just using it for show, then you might get away with every other day. But they do need a fair amount of water. As I mentioned, they like moist, well-drained soil. So we want to keep that soil nice and moist for them as long as we possibly can. It keeps the bloom season going much, much longer. We don't want to water the plants. We don't want to water the leaves. We just want to water the soil. So now we know how to grow them as a perennial, as a garden mum. You can use them indoors. You can use them outdoors, in the landscape, to pop into a container, to make a container around a mum. They're so easy, so versatile, and so many different colors. Whites, yellows, pinks, burgundies, maroons, oranges. There's just a huge collection of colors, and right now we have a great selection. That's why we're talking about them here in the fall season. It's a great time to come in, check out our big mum selection that we've got right now, but also start to think about all the different ways you might want to use them in and around your home. What they do here for us in Hampton Roads is really get us to pansy season. I mean, pansies is still not, it's still too warm to plant pansies, and I think a lot of us in our area at least know that pansies will bloom all the way through the winter season, which is great, which gives us the ability to have some color during the winter season. But until that time comes, there's nothing better than a mum. And the colors are so vibrant and the profusion of blooms is just amazing. So definitely want to try some mums in your yard, in your landscape, around your home, on your deck, porch, or patio. Come in and see us. If you've got any questions, I'm going to come over and answer them now. I hope you all enjoy this. If you're taking off, have a great day. Continue to check out our webinar events online. You can see all the upcoming classes. I hope you like this. I hope you enjoyed this. This is a great time to come in and think about fall. Fall is finally here. The weather is cooling down. Great time to come in and check us out here at McDonald Garden Center. Have a great day, everybody. I'm going to come over and answer your questions. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. All right, so Bridget says, what's the best organic way to treat for powdery mildew? So neem oil would be a very good option. Copper soap is also another good option. We've also got a biological that works very well for powdery mildew. So we've got a couple different options to get rid of powdery mildew. If you suspect that that's what's affecting your plant, I do recommend bringing a little piece in and let us look at it. and then we can make sure that that's what it is. If you're positive it's powdery mildew, come in and see us. We've got a great selection of different things that you can use organically to help prevent and even cure your powdery mildew issue. So definitely come in and check us out, Bridget. Patricia says, is Triple Action a McDonald's project or can it be purchased in other stores? So Patricia, if you're not local, which I'm hoping that you are, we do carry a lot of the Fertilizer brand. Fertilizer brand is something that you're not going to be able to find at Home Depot or Lowe's. They do not sell to big box stores. They only sell to small independent garden centers. You might find it in a hardware store, but they're typically not going to carry the same selection that we are. Very soon here, we're hoping to be online and be able to sell across the country. So you can always kind of keep in tune for that. We'll be continuing to work on getting that up and running as soon as we possibly can. It does take some time, but we are working on that. So that's exciting news. If you can't find it, then you might just do a Google search and see if you can find it somewhere else. But check out your local garden centers. They should have Triple Action or something very similar to it if you can't get it. But Fertilizer makes a great product. This is Triple Action, contains neem oil, pyrethrin, so you should be able to find it in another location if you're not in the Hampton Roads area. If you are in the Hampton Roads area, definitely come and see us. We got plenty of it. All right, so Linda said, my mum is huge and old. It got cut back after it finished, but it collapsed this year, and you can see all the branching as it spread out in a circle. What happened? So Linda, and you said all of your mums are on the ground. So Linda, I hope you were, when you were listening to my talk about how to prune them, hopefully that answered that question. Maybe that was around the same time. If it's big and it's old, might prune more than 1 to 2 inches off. And you might try and do that 2 or 3 times before July 1st. We do want to stop around the 4th of July. I always use the 4th of July as an easy day to remember. That's when we don't want to prune azaleas or camellias because that's when they start to set blooms for next year. So it's kind of a good day to remember, okay, 4th of July is here. I need to stop pruning certain things. What are they? Mums is one of them. But we do want to try and get 2 or 3 prunes in. Now, if yours are big and old, then you might prune more than 1 to 2 inches off. But by pruning them, what it's going to do is encourage a thicker, denser, shrubbier habit, which is going to be able to support those blooms much, much better. If you find that that isn't working, then come and see us in the spring. We sell a product, a stake that's called a grow-through grid. Now, it wouldn't do you any good right now, but in the spring, you put it down before that mum emerges. And what it is a grid system. It's a wire circle. It's a grid, and it's got all these kind of grids coming through it. And what happens is you stake it over top of the plant, and then that will grow up through it, and so it'll support it. And it supports it at a higher stage, and you don't have to stake all the way around it. We also sell circular ones that you can actually wrap around it, but those are a little bit harder to install. I love the grow-through grids. Check those out in the spring. Linda, I think that will help you out immensely. If you've got big old ones and you just can't seem to help, if you're pruning them and it doesn't seem to help, then definitely try the grow-through grid. It's a great staking system and very easy to install. Louis said, do you spray the Triple Action on the leaves and flowers? Yes. So I would want you to probably try and spray before it blooms if you can, but you can spray it on the leaves and the buds. Once it starts to bloom, I would typically let it go, enjoy the blooms. Neem oil, all oils, coat the plant and suffocate the insect or disease or fungus out. But on a sunny day that we might have in September, I mean, we could be in the 90s in September, and if your plant is blooming and you spray neem oil over the top of it, then it can actually create a mini greenhouse effect. So where actually it's creating that coating over the top, and the sun is amplified and can burn your plant up. So you don't want to use neem oil when the temperatures are above 90, which is helpful to know that. What I really want you to do is use it in the spring when that plant first emerges, and then again 2 or 3 times before that July 4th kind of time frame. Once we hit July 4th, let's not touch our mums. Let's let them go and see if we can make it all the way to the spring season. If we see some powdery mildew kind of pop up, then it's not bad to treat it. But when it's blooming, I typically would say let it go and just enjoy the blooms. The best thing that you can do to also help, which I didn't mention this, so I'm glad you brought that up, is in the fall when your mum kind of gets a hard frost, it's going to go dormant. So all the leaves are going to fall off, and the plant's going to kind of molt and go bad. It's going to look black usually or brown. It's going to basically melt away. Go in there and prune it back to the ground. and get rid of all that dead foliage. Especially if you experience powdery mildew or leaf spot or any kind of insect issues, rake up that mulch in that area, remulch the top of it, get rid of that old debris, and that kind of typically will help cure some of the issues that you might have, because a lot of the disease or insects remain in that dead foliage and remain underneath it in the ground. So you want to rake up some of that without disturbing it too much, rake up the leaves, throw it away, and that should help in the future as well. Can you show how to prune? So Deanna, I wish I didn't have a mum that was in perfect shape, but if I were going to prune this, so let's just say that this was in my landscape, and it's not really, it doesn't really have any blooms on it, so it's just a shrub per se. Then what I'm going to do is take my pruning shears or my lopping shears, and I'm just going to come in here and take off about 2 to 3 inches, 1 to 2 inches. So about 1 to 2 inches, giving it a haircut is what I like to say. So we're just tipping it. We're just taking all the tips off, and we're just cutting it back 1 to 2 inches. The nice thing is you can't really mess it up. Even if you mess up the shape a little bit, it's going to kind of reflush. It's going to fill back in. If you prune one section a little bit harder than the other section, just don't prune that section as hard next time. And there's a little room for error here because you can't really mess it up too bad. So I hope that helps. Deanna, that's a tricky one. Maybe what I'll do is we'll tape a segment in the spring and summer of us kind of pruning a mum throughout the season so that you can see how to do it. But pruning is very, very simple. I like to use head shears on them. So the head shears are just kind of your big scissors. You can use hand pruners if they're small, but you're just giving it a haircut. So you're just kind of cutting it back 1 to 2 inches 2 or 3 times. So every time it flushes, it gets a little bit bigger, then go back. And I usually say try and do it in typically around that June 1st time frame, June 15th, June 30th, and then maybe again right there in the middle part of July before July 1st. So we're trying to get 2 or 3 prunes in there. It's going to grow pretty aggressively when we prune it as well. So I hope that helps, Dan. I know that's kind of difficult. I didn't really bring my shears in here. Otherwise, I'd just cut this one just to show you. So Kristen said, when is the best time in Hampton Roads to plant in pot versus ground? So you're always going to get your best selection in the fall, Kristen. So right now is a great time. If you're going to be planting in a pot or in the ground, it's a great time to come in and get them because you're going to get your biggest selection. You're going to be able to see all the colors, all the different types. You also, if you come and keep checking in with us, you might experience that you'll get some early bloomers, some mid bloomers, and some late bloomers. So you can kind of 3 times of the year that they'll bloom. Typically in our area, because of the way our summer kind of goes, we kind of are warm all the way into September and through September. And so typically they're going to bloom in September into October early, and then they're kind of done. And then you're into your pansy season. So, but if you're looking for a selection, now's the time because you're not going to find them any other time. What's the best time to plant in a pot versus the ground? Right now. Right now is the best time to do both because you're going to get the best selection. Now, what you can also do, and I didn't mention this, Kristen, this is a great option, is you can use this in a pot. So I could put this in a clay pot, use it on my front porch. Then when it's done blooming, I can go plant it in my landscape. So that's perfectly fine too. Some people even accidentally keep them in their backyard, and then all of a sudden the next spring they see that they're starting to leaf out of the pot because they're very durable plants. And then they say, heck, I'll plant them now. All right, so can I use them in indoor planters? Yes, you certainly can. We'll have florist mums, which will work great for indoor planters. You can also use a garden mum. Typically, you'll get somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks indoors. Keep them watered. You don't have to water them as much inside. Inside, we don't have wind. We don't have evaporation. So you're not going to get as much of that dryness in your mums. But make sure to keep them moist. Use your testing tool right here on your hand, your finger. Check the soil. If it's starting to get dry, take it to the sink, water it, slip it back in your pot, and you're good to go. But yes, you can definitely grow garden mums indoors. If you want some different selections, the florist mums will be in soon, and they're a great option to add lots of different colors and different shapes and sizes of blooms that you can grow indoors as well. All right, so Chris says, I plant small size in my raised garden bed with ornamental kale and cabbage after I pull out my tomatoes and green beans. I think that's a great option. You got a nice looking raised bed. You can fill it up with your fall plants. The ornamental kales and cabbages. You can actually use chrysanthemums for your spinach and lettuce. It kind of helps keep some of the other insects away because it's got that natural oil in it. So great option, definitely. And then Robin said, are mums good companion plants for cabbage and kale? For sure they are. All right, everybody's saying very informative. I like to put mums. So Teddy said, I like to put mums in my pots on my front porch, but it faces northwest. Are the concerns with mums getting only the late afternoon sun, approximately 3 to 4 hours of sunlight? I don't think that's a problem if you're going to put them in pots, Teddy, for the fall season. I think you're fine, because what you're doing there is kind of treating it as an annual. I just want the fall color. It's going to be pretty. Then what I would do, Teddy, is if you're going to plant them, so if you're going to plant them in your landscape, then I would definitely find a sunnier spot. 4 to 5 or 3 to 4 hours of sunlight is close. I'd love you to get to 5 to 6 hours if you could. And northwest, while you're going to get that late afternoon, you're not going to get a full, good, direct sunlight. I mean, if you got 3 hours of a little bit of sunlight and then 2 or 3 hours of direct sunlight, then that would help. But we definitely want to get a little bit more light on them if you're going to grow them in your landscape. If you're growing them in a pot for just the fall show and for the fall color, you just want a little bit of that fall look, then slip them in a pot. They're going to do fine there because you're going to get 3 to 4 or 5, 6 weeks out of them, and you're going to be perfectly fine in a pot in that shady condition right now. Not a problem, especially if you're growing them as an annual. If you're growing them as a perennial and you're going to plant them afterwards maybe, then if it gets a little bit of powdery mildew towards the end of its blooming cycle, then you can definitely just cut off the foliage when it goes dormant in the winter and then plant the root ball, and it should come back in the spring perfectly fine. Just give it a good amount of sun if you can. So Wendy said, I've heard conflicting ideas about deadheading mums. What do you think? Well, Wendy, you can deadhead them. I will tell you, they typically in our area bloom very profusely all at once, and so deadheading them is difficult. I'll use this one as an example here if I can show you. Let's see if I can find one. So let's say, if you look in there, you can kind of see in there. I've got some buds here. So there's a bud that's not opening. These are all opening. I've got one really small one right in here. Let's see if I can show that to you. Right in there, I've got a little small bud. So what I will typically say is, as these blooms on the top, the main source of your bloom color, as it starts to fade, go in there and start to pick some. And then say, okay, I'm gonna get another little bloom set in here. And you're typically gonna see it especially on our bigger ones. Well, yeah, let me grab this one. So here you go, you can see all of these bigger blooms, and then you can see some smaller ones underneath. So they're really, really little tiny ones in there. Now, if I go and I take if I spend a fair amount of time on deadheading my mums, am I gonna get any of these smaller blooms? Yes, you will, but it won't be the same color that you're gonna get by just letting it completely go into color. And I actually like how mums fade a little bit, and usually they'll fade to a kind of a cool color, and they'll kind of fade to a lighter yellow, which I think is unique. If you do the maroons, it kind of fades to an orange. So you kind of get this cool kind of fading color. So I typically like to let them just go, and I don't typically deadhead them. If you see a good source of buds underneath, so all you gotta do is kind of part those blooms as it starts to bloom, and okay, I see a bunch of buds down there, then you can. It will take some time to do it, but you just take a pair of scissors or a pair of small pruners and just go in there and just take all your little deadheads off, and then you might get another little bloom set. It's not going to be the same as its first big bloom. So that's kind of my feeling, Wendy, on deadheading them. Lisa said, coming to Virginia Beach at the end of September for vacation. We hope to stop by and check everything out. Great. Hope you can come and stop by, Lisa. So Angela said, can they be used as perennials if you keep them in pots? Great question. Yes, with enough soil, they can be grown in pots for years and years. Eventually, they're going to need to go in the ground or into a bigger pot. So that's the thing about mums, is they have a fairly aggressive root system. So what you can do is, after the foliage goes, when we have that first killing frost, just cut it off to the top of the pot. Just cut it right down to the ground. Put your pot somewhere in the backyard so that you don't have to worry about it. Do keep it watered through the winter. If it's a very dry winter, you might want to make sure to keep it watered. And then bring it back out in the spring. I mean, when it starts to foliage out, when it gets all that foliage on it, it's going to look kind of like a little boxwood, as I mentioned. It'll kind of remind you to shear it a couple times, and you get those fall blooms. Eventually, that root system is going to get pretty compact in there that you're going to probably have to go in the landscape. I would typically say in a good sized pot, let's say something like I planted my planter in here, which is I think probably a 12 or 14 inch clay pot. If I just did a single mum in there, I could probably get, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years out of it before it would need to go in the ground. If I'm doing it as a grouping like this, I'm only going to get maybe 1 more year. So this would probably last me another fall season before I would need to go ahead and get these plants in the ground. All right, everybody's saying thanks and how helpful this was, and everybody's saying have a great day. So thank everybody. Thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed this. We'll be continuing to do them, so check out our events page so you can see all the upcoming seminars and anything that's coming up that might interest you. Definitely tune in. We're going to be here for you throughout everything. We'll continue to do these webinars. We're very excited to continue to do them and offer them as a free educational tool and just to kind of something to kind of keep you going and keep you in the yard. Keeps you healthy, keeps you motivated, keeps you going, keeps you happy. So thanks for joining, and I'll see everybody next time. Have a great day.